So, cool. How's everybody doing? Yeah, good morning, everybody. Happy Mother's Day. How many mothers are in the audience? How many mothers in the audience? Okay, so to all of you, an extra special, greetings, and I just want to say, thank you, for all the life that you've brought into the world, and today's your day. Every day is your day, but today's a day with extra focus and emphasis on just everything. So just happy Mother's Day to you, especially, and to all the future mothers and mothers that act as surrogate mothers to their homegirls, kids or their nieces or nephews. Happy Mother's Day to you all as well. As mentioned, my name is Clayton. I'm a Cree from northern Manitoba, and just first and foremost, after recognizing the mothers in the audience, I really want to recognize, the traditional territory that we're in. I guess a new credit, Mississauga new credit. Thank you, and just say that I'm here as a guest, and I'm here to walk lightly in respect. I operate the Canadian Indigenous Tar Sands Campaign for the Indigenous Environmental Network. IEN is a environmental justice network that was founded in the lower 48 in the U.S., but we work all across North America and in recent years all across Mother Earth. And our sole purpose is to fight to protect the sacredness of that mother and to protect her from toxic contamination and from corporate exploitation. And we do this through a variety of means, and the responsibilities that I have are specifically putting all of my efforts, focus, and prayers, on supporting communities on the front line of fighting against what is the world's largest and most destructive development, known as the Canadian tar sands. There's a little picture there. Ben doctored up this PowerPoint, so it's all fancy now. Like, whoosh.
All this photography, though.
I've got special FX going on now. It's like, thank God for people like Ben Powless, Anyway, but basically, Indigenous communities in the sacrifice zone are made up by Dene, Cree, and Métis. And I refer to the tar sands as a sacrifice zone because that's what it is. The Canadian government, and it's ironic actually, the situation, and we'll get into that here with the short time that I have with you, but it's ironic that, out of the 77,000 workers that are required to make the tar sands possible, it is the world's largest construction project ever in the history of mankind. More earth moved in the tar sands since it began, since the Suez Canal, the Great Pyramids, every single dam on the planet, all combined, the Great Wall of China, all combined. That's how much earth they've moved in the tar sands thus far. And they're still nowhere close to where they want to go. And 55,000 out of those 75,000 workers actually fly to the tar sands every single day from the maritime provinces, which, as many of you know, is another sacrifice zone. The fishing industry that sustained that place, that's sustained, both the native and non-native settler communities in that area for the last couple hundred years, of course, collapsed due to lack of federal oversight, due to the complete irresponsibility of the government of Canada. And, here we are. Now these people that are trying to feed their children are now contributing to the rapid deterioration of Cree, Dene, and Métis territory, which they've subsisted on for time immemorial in northern Alberta. And some of these communities include Mikisew Cree First Nation, Athabasca Chippewa First Nation, who of course we're privileged to be joined here today by Susan Deranger, who's just a dear friend and mother of Ariel, who I'm sure many of you met. But Sue's a really amazing voice. Fort McMurray First Nation, Fort Mackay Cree Nation, and also dozens of other communities all across the continent that are impacted not just by the extraction itself, like the communities that I mentioned, but by proposed pipelines and existing pipelines, existing refineries, over 38 in the lower 48 United States, and new refinery proposals. So this project, what it represents essentially is a globally significant threat. and that globally significant threat represents climate change, it represents treaty rights violations, it represents the ongoing, lifting up of this society's addiction to oil, and it represents, energy infrastructure, as we like to call it, the hard wiring of big oil into the next century of the U.S. Military-industrial complex geopolitical strategy. This is the crown jewel in the United States' attempt to have itself secured from an energy perspective, and it represents water contamination, the complete deterioration of human health for communities that got to live beside the development itself, in the midst of the development, or communities that are on the fence line living beside pipelines and refineries. And of course, most of these communities, with the exception of a few, are racialized communities. They're communities of color, indigenous communities. And so, what this really represents is an ongoing situation of severe environmental racism. Because as we know here in Canada and in the United States, communities that live beside the most toxic industries, are usually communities that are the most marginalized. And it's one of the reasons why IEN has gotten involved in this issue, because we were invited by one of Susanna's relatives, Lisa King, who came to our Protecting Mother Earth Summit 5 years ago and said, hey, come down to the tar sands and can you give us some help, bring some of your friends, we need all the help we can get. And just to understand IEN and our environmental justice organizing approach, we don't just drop in on issues unless there's a local led campaign, unless there's a local family, council of grandmothers, a spiritual society, the band council themselves, a hereditary chief and council. The situation's different in every community that we work in, but we don't just drop in and start working on an issue unless we're invited and asked for help. And that's kind of what differentiates us, one of the many things that differentiate us from most ENGOs out there. And so this map demonstrates some of the treaty territories in northern Alberta that are affected, by the tar sands. And, we have to understand that, First Nations people have a unique political and legal identity within the Canadian context. We have nation-to-nation relationships. The Government of Canada has a fiduciary obligation to uphold our treaty rights to protect our health, our water, our access to clean water, clean air, clean earth. But these rights are clearly in jeopardy, and our very survival is at risk when we look at Canada's ongoing expansion of not only the Canadian tar sands, but of big mining all across the Canadian North. In every instance, every single mine, every single tailings pond, every single mega hydroelectric dam, big development essentially. Within 50 to 40 kilometers of one of these developments, you will find a First Nations community, an Inuit settlement. You will find, a Métis village, and you'll find that like for example, what's going on in Lubicon Cree Nation right now, biggest oil spill in 40 years in Alberta. It took them 5 days to notify the community. If that shit happened in one of the affluent communities in Calgary, they would know in hours. People would be, be evacuated. Schools would be shut down. Hospitals would be evacuated. It took them 5 days to notify the community. Children were getting sick and throwing up in the school. They had burning eyes. They were nauseated. They were dizzy. And this is environmental racism. This is the Alberta regulatory process. They're in the pockets of big oil. They didn't even have the decency to show up to the community meeting on Monday. The company did. They showed up 45 minutes late, but the Energy Resource Conservation Board of Alberta didn't even show up. They faxed a one-page letter of facts to the community school. And so, this is the same people that are rubber stamping literally thousands and thousands and thousands of permits every single year, new permits to expand the Canadian tar sands. So IEN, we've been working with multiple First Nations in the region. We've been working with First Nations and American Indian tribes in the lower 48 in British Columbia that are fighting against some of the proposed infrastructure. Hey, how's it going? These are just some pictures. I'm not going to get into the healing walk because I know Susan was going to talk about that. But part of our work that we've been doing, aside from a really focused local support work, helping build local capacity, supporting, you know, First Nations in the region, in the Athabasca, Peace River, and Cold Lake region, to, you know, expand their political base of resistance against the tar sands. We've also, you know, been working with communities that will